Hey guys, what's up? This is Jason Hamburg. This is the series of You Just Bought a Bike, Now What? Basically, the point of this series is I wanted to just give as much information as I can to people who are just getting started in the sport. They just got a dirt bike. They just got a dirt bike for their kid or their family, and they're kind of just lost in the sea of stuff that you think you need or you might not know you need or whatever that looks like. So we're breaking it down, doing a series. In video one, we talk all about gear, the things that are must-haves and the things that are nice-to-haves. And that's kind of how this series is structured, is I want to talk about the must-have things when you first get going in this crazy world. What do you need to have? And then also talk about the things that are nice to have. And over time, that's a moving target. At this point for me, everything that I'm going to talk about in this whole series at this point is pretty much a must-have in order to do the sport at the level that I want to do it. But for a lot of people, I just want to point them in the right direction to get started without breaking the bank, be able to do this comfortably, safely, and just have as much fun as possible, because riding dirt bikes is rad. So in this video, we're going to talk about kind of spare parts and also maintenance, things that you need to keep your bike maintained and just going, and we'll go from there. So again, cue sweet intro. So first things first, I want to talk about the idea of spare parts. And realistically, I sat down to try to write this list out and then kind of came to the conclusion that you don't need any spare parts to get started. It's too much of a kind of crapshoot, if you will, around what you're going to break right off the start. And ultimately, if you have a good relationship with your dealer, over time you will start to realize the things that are maybe break more frequently or wear out more frequently, and the things that you need to prioritize and keep in your own personal inventory so that you're not missing ride days and that sort of thing. So ultimately, there are no must-have spare parts right off the get-go. Get your bike, get the right safety equipment for yourself, and just go out and ride. I see a ton of people who first get into it and they start putting all sorts of shit all over their bike because they were reading in forums you need to do this or you need to do that. I've said it before a number of times in other videos that I have. The person who prioritizes getting out and riding and just getting better will outride the person who prioritizes parts and equipment and upgrades and all this shit, but never gets out and actually rides. Be the person who just rides their bike, puts in hours, focuses on getting better, because you'll have more fun and you'll be a better rider in the end. With all that being said, there's some things that are nice to have parts that you can get and over time kind of accumulate and keep in your own inventory that will make life better. So I want to talk about a few of those things now. Obviously, this is just scratching the surface of all the different things that you can keep in your own inventory. But these are some of the big ones that I think if you have, it just prevents missing ride days. It prevents, driving all the way out to a spot, tipping over and breaking something and not having a spare with you ready to go. First up, one of the biggest things that I would recommend is pick up a couple extra air filters for your bike. Air filters aren't very expensive. They're like 30, 40 bucks. And if you have a few of them, the nice thing is when it comes time to actually clean them, you can just do it in a single batch. It takes 15 minutes to clean 5 air filters, and it takes 15 minutes to clean 1 air filter, realistically. So having a few spare air filters is really awesome, because it means that, on a Sunday morning, you're about to go out ride with your friends, you pop your side cover or your seat, and you look at your filter, it's totally like mangled and gnarly, and it means that you can't ride because now you got to try to wash it and dry it and all the stuff. If you have spare filters, you can just quickly pull the old one out, oil up a new one, and throw it in. A quick little tip when it comes to air filters, you can take like a clothes hanger, just a wire clothes hanger, snip it right there, and then you have this nice little like filter hanger. I probably have like 7 or 8 air filters that I keep in rotation, and then I ride a lot, and I probably only have to clean air filters like twice or 3 times a year. So spare air filters are awesome. Another thing that's really good to keep if you can afford to buy a set is a spare set of handlebars. I keep a spare set of handlebars available at all times. Again, I just never want to be in a situation where I'm partway through a ride on a big ride day or something. We're at the track, I tip over and break a set of handlebars or bend a set. It's nice to have a spare set, throw those on, and continue with your ride day. I'm really fortunate. I use Flex handlebars by Fast Company. But realistically, yeah, every shop is going to have a few different sets of spare handlebars on their walls or whatever. Having a spare set is awesome. A lot of times what I'll recommend is as you get more in tune with your bike and you learn what you like and what feels better, you might actually end up upgrading your handlebars to something just with a different bend or a different height or whatever that looks like. Keep your old set handy, and that's a good way to kind of accumulate these spare parts. Is as you do make upgrades to the chassis or to the performance of the bike, keep the old stuff and then you now have a spare, so that worst case scenario, you can always go back to the stock handlebars and not miss a ride. Another thing that's really nice to have handy at all times, depending on what your setup is for your tires and wheels, is just keeping like a spare tube somewhere in your garage or your shop. Again, you go out to go for a ride. It's basically the story with all of this is you go out to go for a ride and you look and you have a flat tire. Having a spare tube is really nice. You can quickly take your tire off, swap the tube over, and you're not going to miss that riding opportunity. Over time, maybe you make the transition from what the bike comes stock with, which is a tube, into something like a Moose or a tubeless system. Again, keeping a spare tube handy all the time is just a good way to kind of safeguard yourself. I use Tubeless in my bike, which is kind of just a different platform. But I always keep a spare tube just in case the Tubeless runs into issues and it's not working. You can always kind of default back to that tube. It's a good old staple as far as tires are concerned, and it'll do the trick. The same thing applies. I always like to try to keep a spare tire with me. We don't have a ton of rock where I live, but I know a lot of people where they have a lot of rock or sharp, jagged terrain, and they can get a sidewall slice in a tire. Now that tire is wrecked, and you don't want to be having to go down to a shop or the shop's not open or have to order something in. So just having a spare tire is, again, nice to have. Another good thing to have with you, and again, this comes back to that idea of like as you do upgrade your bike and put new parts on, the parts that you take off, make that your spare kit. So for example, every new bike that I get, I always put unbreakable folding levers on my bikes, but I keep the stock levers just in the event that for some reason something breaks. I can throw on the stock lever and I'm not in a pinch missing a ride. Same sort of thing goes where I'll keep grips. This is actually a brand new set of grips that I'm going to plan on putting on my bike. But in the event that I replace my grips, I'll take the old ones off, I'll keep them in here, and then if for some reason these get super damaged once I put them on, I can always go back to the old ones. They're not going to be perfect, but they're going to be better than nothing. And like I said, all of these are kind of nice to have things. In time, you'll slowly accumulate a bit of an inventory of spare parts, and you'll make the mistake of realizing you want to go for a ride, but your brake pads are worn out or all those sorts of things. So in time, you'll come to realize the stuff that's just handy to have a spare version of. It just comes with the territory of learning what wears out, what breaks, and how to make sure that you're not missing rides because you don't have spare bits and bobs. But in the end, as far as parts are concerned, just go out, ride your bike, and I don't think there's anything that's really like a must-have item to keep with you right off the get-go. Okay, so the other piece of this kind of parts and maintenance equation is the maintenance side of it. One of the things that's really cool about dirt bikes, but at the same time is a huge headache and a pain in the ass, is that you need to keep them maintained so that they continue to run. They don't wear out faster than they need to. And in time, I think you can learn to enjoy that process. At this point, I obviously grew up when you're a kid, doing any form of bike maintenance is the worst. But at this point, it's nice to just put some music on in the garage and kind of work away and keep things tidy and working well. So there's some different things that when you first get started, if you just quickly grab a few different supplies, it'll make the maintenance process a lot easier. And then in time, like with the parts, you just learn what you need to keep more of, what maybe you never use and you don't need. Yeah, you'll kind of build out a bit of, again, an inventory of stuff that just makes life easier. But if you prioritize maintenance, your bike will last longer, it'll run better, it'll maintain its value a lot better, so that when you go to sell it, it's not this like roached out pile of shit. So here's some things to think about. Okay, so when you first pick up your bike, you're gonna head out, go home, and you wanna go riding. One of the first things that you need to think about is fuel. If you have a 2-stroke, you're going to need mix oil and a jerry can. If you have a 4-stroke, you're just going to need a jerry can. Sometimes if you go to a track or you go out riding and you see people who are more experienced, they have kind of like the fancy jerry can with like the big hose off the top. Just literally any jerry can that you have around the house, like the red 20-liter thing, will work. Doesn't need to be anything fancy. The reason those clear ones are nice is the hose just makes things a little bit easier so you're not spilling, and you can actually see, because it's clear, if you have mix oil, you can see that the gas is mixed or not. I use Dominator mix oil by Amsoil, and I mix it at a 40-to-1 ratio. Different people mix their fuel for their 2-strokes at different ratios. A ratio is essentially just the ratio of fuel to oil. I chose 40-to-1 because I felt like it's enough oil in that mixture that it's protecting my engine while not being so kind of thick that my bike gets like clogged up if I'm not revving it out all the time. But honestly, follow whatever your owner's manual says to do, and in time you'll kind of learn what makes sense for you. I actually also would recommend picking up one of these quick mix little things. I think they're made by Maxima. But the nice thing about this is it literally just gives you like the ratio, how much oil versus how much fuel to put in. It's just a really quick, simple, easy tool, so you're not kind of guessing. It takes the guesswork out of things. But obviously you're gonna need mix oil. If you have a 4-stroke, just get a jerry can. Another thing to think about, if you have a 4-stroke, the way that a 4-stroke engine is lubricated, it has a separate place for engine oil. Pick up a couple liters of engine oil and some spare engine oil filters. Again, just follow your owner's manual. It'll tell you how frequently to kind of be changing that. But it's nice to just have it on hand so that when you realize that you need to do an oil change, it's there and ready to go. You're not having to run down to the shop or run somewhere to pick up the oil. Another really good tool to have, speaking of changing your engine oil, is an hour meter. You can pick up an hour meter from any sort of bike shop, and the way that it works is you just mount it somewhere on your bike, and then a cable from that runs down to the top of your spark plug and just coils around your spark plug cable. And I guess I'm gonna say all the words wrong, but like the electricity from that spark plug cable fires the hour meter and just keeps track of how many engine hours you're putting on your bike. Some of the newer Austrian bikes actually have hour meters, I believe, built into the dashboards. But if you have an older bike or a bike that doesn't have that, throwing an hour meter on right from the very beginning is a great way to track your maintenance intervals and make sure that you're changing the oil frequently enough, or keep track of how long parts are lasting on your bike. I have mine mounted right underneath my handlebar crossbar pad, and I'll change my transmission oil in my YZ250 every 10 to 12 hours. It's just a quick, easy way. I keep a note on an app on my phone and just make sure that you're not going forever without changing it, or not changing it more frequently than you need to. When you pick up your new bike, it's gonna come with, in the radiator coolant system, is gonna have antifreeze in it. Having some spare antifreeze, or at the very bare minimum, a bottle of like distilled water that you keep with you, is a really good thing, because if you're out on a trail ride and your bike overheats because you get stuck on a log or a rock or something, your bike gets hot and it spills out coolant, having some spare coolant back of the truck or some distilled water to put in the rads to top it back up is good. You don't want to be operating your bike with a radiator that doesn't have all the fluid and coolant in it. Over time, you can kind of experiment. I use a thing called Evans coolant, which is actually like a waterless coolant with a higher boiling temperature than antifreeze or than water. But again, this is a nice to have. It's not a must have. I would say just, a bottle of some spare coolant, 50-50 mix coolant and distilled water is kind of all you need to get started, but it's a good thing to have so that you don't find yourself in a pinch or running your bike without all the coolant that it should probably have in it. Another really nice thing to have, and I would say kind of a must, just to make life easier in the early stages of maintenance, especially early stages, because you're going to suck at it and you're going to be spilling crap all over the place, is just a couple cans of brake clean. Obviously, it's a great tool to use to actually clean your brake discs, but ultimately, we use this stuff just for all sorts of cleanup. If you spill oil on the side of your engine, spill oil on the ground, whatever that is, it's just great. It dries nice. It just evaporates so it doesn't leave any residue. And it's just a great tool to kind of keep brakes and parts clean. So pick up a can of this and it will make life easier as far as cleanup is concerned. So yeah, if you have a 4-stroke, you're going to need engine oil and engine oil filters. If you bought a 2-stroke, the other main kind of oil that you're going to need besides the mix oil that goes in your gas is transmission oil. Every dealer is going to have some form of transmission oil. Ask them, see what they recommend. For me, I've always ran ATF. Way back since I was a kid, my dad would put it in like my 85, 125s, and then I still use it today. I use like a Petro-Canada. It's a Dextron 6 automatic transmission fluid. Some people run like a Shell Rotella. Yeah, ultimately, whatever you run will just give your clutch a slightly different feel at the lever, and then also performance-wise. Pick up a couple bottles of some form of transmission oil, because again, you don't want to realize that you haven't changed your oil. You have to run down to the shop and pick it up, or just not be able to ride because you can't get oil for it. So I just buy like a big 12-pack of these or 24-pack of these and change them out every 10 hours-ish. Having spare oil for your transmission, if you have a 2-stroke, is really important. I would say the last major must-have item is a bottle of air filter oil and potentially air filter cleaner, but not even. Air filter oil at the bare minimum. Depending on where you're riding and how dusty it is, how sandy it is, you will need to be kind of changing your air filter more frequently than probably anything else on your bike. It's pretty much, for me, the two main things that I do would be like transmission oil and air filters. Those would be the two main pieces of maintenance that I do regularly. So pick up a bottle of air filter oil. I use the Muck Off stuff. It works really well. It comes out kind of nice and thin, but then once it's exposed to air, it gets nice and tacky. If you've never had any experience with air filter oil before, it's weird as hell. It's like incredibly tacky. So the other thing that I would say is a must-have would be a set of like nitrile or latex gloves. I just get a big box of these from Costco, but of all the oils to get on your hands, air filter oil is by far the worst. It's just like super, super tacky. It's really hard to get cleaned up. So pick up a set of gloves and a bottle of oil. And then obviously, as you're working away, you would put this on your filter and get it back into your bike. I clean my filters with a big like 20-liter thing of solvent that I probably bought 4 years ago now. Solvent works really good as like the stage 1 cleaner, and then from there you can move it into hot soapy water. Some companies, like Muck Off, make an air filter cleaner specific. It's a little bit less harsh than a solvent, but it obviously comes with an added cost because you don't have as much of it to work with. Another thing that I see a lot of people use to clean their filters would be just like an ice cream pail, and they'll throw some straight gasoline in there, stick their filter in and kind of clean it up like that, and then do a stage 2 clean with some like hot soapy water, and then hang dry it to dry. If you have a couple spare filters, you can do a few filters at once and then hang them to dry, and then they're not wet when you put the oil back onto them. Yeah, I kind of drifted into the nice to haves there. The most important thing would be have this. You can always clean your filters with some gasoline, some hot soapy water, but air filter oil is kind of the only oil that you can really run on a filter. When I was a kid, my dad didn't know that and covered my filter in ATF, and then we came out into the garage the next morning and the entire amount of ATF that we had put on the filter had just fallen out of the filter onto the ground. So this stuff is great. It tacks up and it stops all the dirt and dust and stuff from getting through your filter and into your bike. That's basically a list of the must-haves. things that you should think about getting when you first pick up your bike and you head out. So as you get more experienced and you're working on your bike and learning kind of the basics of maintenance, you'll then come to realize that there's just layers upon layers of the different things that are nice to have when it comes to working on your bike. A few things that I would say would be good to think about getting in time as you work away would firstly be zip ties. I don't really condone zip tying your bike together to actually hold it together from a structural standpoint, but zip ties are just a great way to like keep your cables in the right place or pull things up out of the way, that sort of thing. So a set of zip ties is great. I have some loose ones here, but I have just like a big bag of them that I always keep handy. Another kind of good thing as far as maintenance is concerned is like when it comes to washing your bike, finding a cleaner that isn't super corrosive or gonna like dull out your plastic or be hard on any of the bearings and seals or whatever. I use a cleaner made by a company called Muck Off. Again, same company that makes my air filter oil. They make just a really nice cleaner. It takes a lot of the dirt and grime and grease away, but it's not hard or harsh on like seals and bearings and all that sort of stuff. So keeping a cleaner available for when you go to wash your bike is great. Along the lines of washing your bike, again, another nice to have item would be an actual pressure washer. A hose and spray nozzle works well, but a nice kind of like low or light duty pressure washer is great. Just takes the mud and the gunk off a lot cleaner and a lot faster. And you're not having to just like spray your bike forever to try to get that mud and that dirt off. There's basically just like, again, an endless list of nice to have items, things like greases and brake fluids and all these different things, but you don't necessarily need to do all of that all the time. That sort of maintenance isn't as frequent, so it's a lot easier to just go out and pick up key supplies when you need to do certain things like grease for linkage or doing your brake lines or something like that. So ultimately, most of what I've gone through today is primarily kind of must-haves. There's the odd nice-to-have item in there, though, that would additionally be good to have when it comes to just the maintenance, day-to-day maintenance of your bike. Yeah, I could probably go into way more detail around how to do specific maintenance or maintenance intervals, all that sort of stuff. If that's something that you think would be valuable, or if you like the format of these and want to see me kind of talk about it, let me know in the comments below, and maybe it's kind of an extension of this series in the future. But yeah, as far as everything goes, that's kind of all I have to talk about as far as parts and maintenance are concerned. If you haven't already, check out video 1, which talks about gear and safety equipment for yourself, the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. And then stay tuned for video 3, which is going to talk about tools and getting yourself set up so that this maintenance that we've talked about can be done a lot faster and more efficiently because you have the right tools to take apart and reassemble your bike as needed. So, as always, until next time, thank you. Sponsor me.